I stood at her grave until my legs went numb, until the cold marble beneath my fingers felt warmer than my own skin. 6 months of mornings waking up to silence. 6 months of nights reaching across the bed where Sarah used to sleep, finding nothing but emptiness and sheets that stayed cold no matter how long. I lay there. 6 months of learning how to exist in a world that had lost all its color. Or so I thought. That Tuesday morning, I went to the grocery store because grief doesn't excuse an empty refrigerator, and my daughter kept calling, worried I wasn't eating. I remember standing in the canned goods aisle, staring at rows of beans and soups, thinking how strange it was that life kept moving so normally. When mine had stopped completely, I reached for a jar of tomato sauce, the kind Sarah always bought, the one she used in her famous pasta dish that made our house smell like home. That's when I heard it. Her voice. Not loud, not calling my name, just a familiar sound carried by habit. A soft laugh followed by a comment about organic prices being ridiculous. The exact same tone I had listened to for 41 years. The sound that used to drift from the kitchen while she prepared dinner. The sound that used to wake me up on Sunday mornings when she'd sing while making coffee. The sound I had sworn, standing at her funeral while rain hammered against my umbrella, I would never hear again. My hand froze mid-air. The jar slipped from my fingers before I could stop it, crashing against the floor. Red sauce exploding across white tile like something alive, like blood, like proof that my heart was still beating even though it felt dead inside my chest. People gasped around me. Someone said, "Sir, are you okay?" I didn't answer. I couldn't answer. My feet were already moving, my body operating on instinct that bypassed reason entirely. "Sarah," I called out, my voice breaking apart as it left my throat, cracking like I was a teenager again. "Sarah, it's me." She turned. For one terrible, hopeful second, I expected recognition. I expected shock. I expected her face to light up the way it always did when she saw me after I came home from work. That smile that made 41 years feel like it had passed in a beautiful blur. Instead, she looked confused. Genuinely, completely confused. Like I was a stranger who had just called her by the wrong name. "I'm sorry," she said slowly, carefully, as if speaking to someone fragile, someone potentially dangerous. "I think you have me mistaken for someone else." Those words hit harder than the news of her death had. Harder than the phone call from the hospital. Harder than watching them lower her casket into the ground, while I stood there wondering how I was supposed to keep breathing without her. Mistaken, as if 41 years could be mistaken. As if I hadn't memorized every line of her face in the dark, every freckle on her shoulders, every expression she made when she was happy or angry or lost in thought. "No," I whispered, stepping closer. My hands trembling so badly I shoved them into my pockets. "No, Sarah, it's me, William. Your husband." She took a step back. That movement hurt more than anything. Sarah never stepped away from me, not once. Not even during our worst arguments. The ones that lasted hours, she never physically retreated. Not when I lost my job and spiraled into depression. Not when my mother died and I shut down emotionally for months. She always stayed close, always reached for me even when I didn't deserve it. "My name is Jennifer," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Jennifer Caldwell. I don't know you, sir." "I really don't." Her voice was the same. Deep for a woman, slightly husky. The voice that told me she loved me on quiet nights when words felt too small. The voice that sang our daughter to sleep. The voice that laughed at my terrible jokes even when they weren't funny. Reached for my phone with shaking hands, nearly dropping it twice before I managed to pull up a photo from last summer. Her last birthday. The last time I saw her truly happy. Us sitting on the back porch of our house, her arm around my waist, me kissing her cheek while she laughed. The sunset behind us painted everything gold. I held it up between us, my hand trembling so violently the screen shook. "Look," I said, desperation making my voice too loud. "Look at this. Do you remember this day? You made me wear that ridiculous Hawaiian shirt you bought me as a joke." She glanced at the screen. Just for a moment, something flickered in her eyes. A pause too long, a tightening of her jaw, a quick breath inward like she'd been punched. Then she shook her head, but not before I saw it. Fear, actual fear in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she repeated, but her voice had changed, become harder, more guarded. "I've never seen that photo before." "You must be going through something very difficult." "Sir, you should probably talk to someone." She placed a hand on my shoulder, and that touch nearly destroyed me completely. It was her hand, the same warmth, the same weight, the same gentle pressure she always used when she wanted to calm me down. When I was stressed about work or worried about money or anxious about our daughter, please, she continued, her eyes now darting toward the store employees who were watching us. You need help. Maybe sit down. Get some water. Talk to someone professional. I stared at her left hand, the one on my shoulder. Show me your wrist, I said suddenly, my voice strange and distant. She frowned, pulling her hand back. What, your wrist? Show me your left wrist. She hesitated too long before shaking her head. I need to go now, she said quickly, already turning her card away. I truly hope you get the help you need. And just like that, she walked away. I stood there shaking while an employee approached, with a mop and caution tape for the broken jar. People avoided my eyes. Someone whispered, poor guy. Probably lost his wife. They were wrong. I wasn't poor. I was terrified. Because as I watched her disappear toward the checkout, one thought screamed louder than my grief ever had. Louder than the loneliness that had consumed me for 6 months. Louder than anything I'd ever known. If my wife was alive, then who the hell was buried in her grave? And whatever the answer was, I knew my life was about to break open in ways I couldn't yet imagine. Couldn't yet comprehend. Couldn't possibly survive. I should have left the store. I should have driven home. Locked the door, called my therapist, and told her that grief had finally broken something fundamental inside my brain. That would have been easier. That would have been cleaner. That would have let me keep living in the world I understood, where death meant death and buried meant gone forever. But I didn't leave. I watched her from the end of the aisle as she paid for her groceries. She used a credit card. I noticed that because Sarah always used cash. Always complained about credit card fees and interest rates. Always kept exact change in her wallet. This woman swiped her card without looking at the total. She didn't check the receipt. She folded the bags carefully, methodically, the same way my wife used to. Heavy items at the bottom, bread and eggs on top, produce in a separate bag so it wouldn't get crushed. My chest felt tight, every breath shallow and painful. When she pushed the cart toward the exit, my feet moved without asking permission. I followed at a distance, ducking behind displays, pretending to read labels on products I had no intention of buying. I felt ridiculous and desperate and completely awake all at once. More awake than I'd been in 6 months of sleepwalking through my life. Outside, the afternoon sun hit my face with unexpected warmth. She loaded her groceries into an old sedan. Dark blue paint faded by time and weather. A small dent along the passenger door. Not the car Sarah owned. Not the silver SUV she loved and kept meticulously clean, vacuuming it every Saturday morning. Still, the way she placed the bags inside was unmistakable. Methodical, efficient, the muscle memory of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. I memorized the license plate without realizing I was doing it, my brain automatically cataloging information like I was preparing for something, though I didn't know what. She pulled out of the parking lot and drove away, heading west toward neighborhoods I barely knew. I stood there for exactly 4 seconds, my hands clenched at my sides, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then I walked to my car, the one Sarah insisted I buy 2 years before she died, saying she wanted me to have something safe, something reliable, something that would last. I followed her. I stayed 3 or 4 car lengths back, close enough not to lose her at traffic lights, far enough not to be noticed. My heart pounded so loudly I was afraid it would somehow give me away, that she'd hear it through the metal and glass separating us. We passed streets I knew, then turned into neighborhoods I rarely visited, areas where houses grew smaller, older, more modest. She slowed and turned onto a quiet street lined with oak trees and low fences. The kind of street where kids played basketball in driveways and neighbors knew each other's names. She parked in front of a simple house, painted a soft yellow, the kind of color meant to feel cheerful and welcoming. A white picket fence framed a small yard with flowers I didn't recognize. Wind chimes hung near the porch, making soft music in the breeze. She stepped out with the grocery bags, moving with the same grace she always had despite being in her 60s. Then the front door opened, and my world tilted sideways. A man appeared, late 50s, maybe early 60s, tall, graying hair, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. He smiled when he saw her. Not a polite smile, a familiar one, an intimate one. He leaned in and kissed her. On the lips, a real kiss, a married kiss. My vision blurred. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. She kissed him back, easy and natural, then handed him one of the bags while they spoke to each other softly. I couldn't hear the words, but I recognized the intimacy, the ease, the comfort of shared routines built over years. Then two children burst through the doorway, a boy and a girl around 8 and 10 years old. They ran straight toward her, arms flung wide, shouting with pure joy. "Grandma!" the girl shouted. "Did you bring the cookies?" "You promised cookies." She laughed. That laugh. The sound hit me like a physical blow, destroyed something inside me that I didn't know could still break. That lopsided, warm laugh. The laugh I heard in our kitchen for decades when I'd tell her about my day. The laugh I thought I'd never hear again. The laugh I'd mourned for 6 months while sleeping alone in a bed that felt enormous without her. She crouched down, letting them climb onto her, balancing grocery bags with practiced skill, the same skill she'd used with our daughter when she was that age. The man watched, smiling, his hand resting lightly on her back. They all went inside together, a complete family, moving in synchronized harmony that spoke of years together. The door closed behind them with a soft click that felt like a gunshot. I sat frozen in my car, parked halfway down the street, my hand still gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left in the universe. The sun streamed through the windshield, warming my face, but I felt cold. So cold I was shaking. Only then did I realize I was crying. Not sobbing, not gasping for air, just steady tears sliding down my cheeks, soaking into my collar, dripping onto my hands. 41 years of marriage, 6 months of mourning, nights spent alone, whispering her name into the dark, begging God or the universe or anyone who would listen to bring her back, to let me have just one more day, one more hour, one more conversation. And she was here, alive, laughing, holding children who weren't mine, kissing a man who wasn't me, living in a house I'd never seen before. Took out my phone and began taking pictures. The house, the car, the address number by the door. My hands shook so badly that most photos came out blurred, but a few were clear enough, sharp enough to prove I wasn't losing my mind. As the light began to fade and evening crept in, I started my car and drove away slowly, carefully, like I was afraid sudden movement would shatter whatever fragile reality I was clinging to. I don't remember the drive home. I only remember sitting in my garage afterward, engine off, staring at my phone, zooming in on her face again and again. Every line matched, every shadow, every detail. The small scar above her left eyebrow from when she fell off her bike as a child. The way her nose tilted slightly to the right. The exact shape of her smile. When I finally went inside my empty house, the silence crushed me. A single question echoed louder than anything else, bouncing off walls that suddenly felt like they belonged to a stranger's life. If Sarah was alive, then who had I buried 6 months ago? Who had I mourned? Who had I cried over? Who was laying in that grave with her name carved into marble? The answers, I was beginning to realize, would destroy everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and the woman I'd loved for 41 years. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with a single lamp on, the rest of the house swallowed by darkness that felt alive, breathing, watching. My phone lay beside old photo albums spread open like evidence at a crime scene, like pieces of a puzzle I was too afraid to solve. I moved between them slowly, deliberately, as if speed might break whatever fragile thread was holding my sanity together. I zoomed in on the photos I'd taken that afternoon, her face as she turned toward the house, her profile through the car window, her hand on the child's shoulder. Then I looked down at pictures from our past, spread across the table like a timeline of a life I thought I'd lived. Our wedding day, her in that simple white dress she'd chosen because she said elaborate gowns were wasteful. The photo from when our daughter was born. Sarah, exhausted but radiant, holding this tiny human we'd created together. A beach photo from 15 years ago, where her shirt had ridden up slightly while we walked. Every detail matched. The small birthmark on her left shoulder blade. The scar above her eyebrow. The slight gap between her two front teeth that she was self-conscious about, but I always loved. Even the unevenness in her earlobes, one slightly lower than the other. Something only I ever noticed. Because I'd studied her face for 4 decades. These weren't things grief invented. These weren't tricks of memory or wishful thinking. These were facts etched by time, documented in photographs, verified by years of intimate knowledge. I pressed my fingers to my lips to stop them from trembling. Twins didn't share scars. Strangers didn't share memories written into flesh. People didn't rise from graves like this was some kind of miracle story. Some religious parable about faith and resurrection. I stood up and paced the house, my footsteps echoing in rooms that suddenly felt unfamiliar, like I'd walked into a museum of my own life. This place was supposed to be my sanctuary, the home Sarah and I had built together, the walls we'd painted, the floors we'd chosen, the memories we'd made in every corner. Now it felt like a stage set built on lies, a facade I'd been too blind to see through. At 3:40 in the morning, my body vibrating with exhaustion and adrenaline, I stopped pacing and picked up my phone. I called my daughter. It rang once, twice, 3 times, each ring feeling like an eternity. On the 4th ring, Emma answered, her voice thick with sleep and alarm. "Dad, do you know what time it is?" "Is everything okay? I need you to come over right now," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Dad, it's the middle of the night. Did something happen? Are you hurt?" "Yes," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Something happened. I saw your mother yesterday." Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Then a breath, sharp and controlled. The sound she made when she was trying not to panic. "Dad, what did you take?" "Did you forget your medication? Dr. Stevens said you need to stay on schedule." I followed her home, Emma. I saw where she lives. I saw her family. My voice didn't shake. That seemed to scare her more than if I'd been crying. "Stay there," she said finally, her voice shifting into the tone she used when managing a crisis, the same tone she'd used at the funeral when everything fell apart. "Don't go anywhere. Don't do anything. I'm coming right now." The call ended. I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked, maybe for the first time in months. I barely recognized the man staring back. Dark circles under bloodshot eyes. Hair that had gone almost completely gray in 6 months. A face that looked 10 years older than it had at the funeral. Deep lines carved by grief and sleepless nights. When Emma arrived 35 minutes later, she didn't knock. She used her key, the one we'd given her when she turned 16 and never asked for back. She found me at the kitchen table, surrounded by photos like a detective trying to solve a murder. "Dad," she said softly, moving slowly like I was a wild animal that might bolt. "What's going on?" "Talk to me." I handed her my phone without speaking. I watched her face as she scrolled through the photos I'd taken. At first there was confusion, her eyebrows drawing together. Then disbelief, her mouth opening slightly. Then something else entered her expression. Something that looked like fear, but also like recognition. She swallowed hard and handed the phone back, not meeting my eyes. "She looks like Mom," she said carefully, each word chosen with precision. "But people resemble each other all the time. It happens more than you'd think. There are only so many facial structures in the world." "Did you see her shoulder?" I asked quietly. "The birthmark, the exact shape and position." Emma rubbed her face, a gesture she'd inherited from me. "Something she did when she was stressed or trying to buy time to think." "Dad, we buried Mom. You were there." "I was there. Everyone was there." We said goodbye. "A closed casket," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked away, staring at the wall instead of at me. "They said it was better that way," she replied, her voice tight. "The accident was bad. The body was too damaged. They said it would be traumatic to see her like that." "Did you see her body, Emma?" I asked, leaning forward. "Before they closed the casket, did you actually see your mother's body?" Her jaw tightened, a muscle jumping near her ear. "No, neither did I said. "Neither did anyone. We took their word for it. We believed what we were told because why wouldn't we? Why would we question it?" The room felt suddenly very small, the walls pressing in. Emma stood up, pacing the same path I'd worn into the floor over the past 6 hours. "Dad, this is insane. What are you suggesting? That Mom faked her death? That she's living some secret life? That the past 6 months have been a lie?" "I want to go back there," I said, standing up to face her. "I want you to come with me. I want you to see her with your own eyes and then tell me I'm crazy." "Dad, this isn't healthy. This is grief doing terrible things to your mind. Are you coming or am I going alone?" The ultimatum hung between us. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact second she made her decision. The way her shoulders dropped. The way she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Fine," she said finally. "We'll go together. We'll go so you can see that it's not her. So you can let this go and maybe finally start healing." We left in silence, the pre-dawn darkness still heavy around us. I drove because Emma was too shaken, her hands trembling in her lap. As we turned onto the quiet street with the soft yellow house, my heart began to race again, adrenaline flooding my system. "That's the one," I said, pointing. Emma parked down the street, far enough away not to be obvious. We sat there watching the house as the sun began to rise, painting everything in shades of pink and gold. After maybe 15 minutes, the front door opened. She stepped out, wearing jogging clothes, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She stretched on the porch, the same routine she'd done every morning of our marriage. The exact same movements, right leg first, then left, arms overhead, back bend. Emma leaned forward, her breath catching. The color drained from her face so fast I was afraid she might pass out. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Dad." In that moment, before she said another word, I knew that whatever truth she'd been carrying, whatever secrets she'd been keeping, they were finally breaking her too. Emma didn't start the car. She sat there gripping the steering wheel, her knuckles white, her breathing rapid and shallow. I watched my daughter's world collapse in real time. Watched the same devastation I'd felt in the grocery store ripple across her face. "Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." Those words landed with terrifying clarity. Sorry meant guilt. Sorry meant knowledge. Sorry meant this nightmare was real, and my daughter had been part of it. "Tell me," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, detached, like it belonged to someone else. "Tell me everything right now." She lifted her head and looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Shame. Deep, consuming shame that made her look 10 years older. "Mom didn't die in that accident." The words hung between us like poison gas, heavy and suffocating. I didn't scream. I didn't gasp. Some part of me had already crossed into a place where shock couldn't reach anymore. I simply nodded once, slowly. "Go on." She took a deep breath, like she was preparing to dive underwater and wasn't sure she'd come back up. "She had another family, Dad, for a long time. Over 20 years. That woman you saw yesterday, that's not her pretending to be someone else. That's who she actually became. The man, Richard, she's been married to him for 18 years. Legally married." "While still married to me," I said, my voice flat. "Yes, the children are her grandchildren. Her daughter, Rebecca, she's 15 now. She doesn't know Mom ever had another life. Doesn't know I exist." I stared straight ahead at the yellow house, at the life my wife had built, while I thought we were building ours together. "How long did you know?" I asked. 3 years, Emma admitted, tears streaming down her face now. "I found out by accident. I was helping her with some paperwork for her real estate license renewal. I saw duplicate documents, 2 different addresses, 2 different sets of tax returns, 2 complete lives. My chest felt like something was crushing it from the inside. 3 years. 3 years she'd known and said nothing while I lived in ignorance, while I believed in a marriage that was a fantasy. And you said nothing to me." She wiped her face with her sleeve, mascara smearing. "She begged me not to tell you, Dad. She said it would destroy you. She said you had a weak heart, that the shock could literally kill you. She said if you found out, you'd have a heart attack or a stroke or you'd hurt yourself." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. "You believed her?" "Yes," Emma whispered miserably. "I believed her because I was terrified of losing both of you. I thought if I kept the secret I could protect you. I thought I was doing the right thing." The silence stretched between us, vast and unbridgeable. "Then what happened 6 months ago?" I asked. "How did we get from there to a funeral?" Emma's hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. She came to me with a plan. She said she wanted to end the double life completely, that it was destroying her mentally, that she couldn't do it anymore. She said she wanted to be with Richard and his family full time. But if she divorced you, you'd be devastated. You'd fight it. It would drag out for years and destroy everyone involved. So she decided it would be easier, cleaner, kinder if you just thought she was dead. The word kinder hit me like a slap. "Kinder for whom?" I asked. "For you," Emma said quietly. "She convinced me it was for you, that you'd grieve but eventually heal, that it was better than the alternative. Better than me knowing the truth." "Yes, how did she fake it?" My voice was eerily calm, distant, like I was asking about someone else's life. Emma swallowed hard, her face pale. "There was a woman, a homeless woman in her early 60s who was terminally ill, stage 4 cancer. No family except a sister she hadn't spoken to in years. Mom found her through some outreach program she volunteered at. She paid her $20,000 to agree to the plan. Paid the sister too, another $10,000. They staged the car accident. The woman, Patricia was her name, she was driving Mom's car. The crash was real. She died on impact. The body was badly damaged. The police used Mom's ID that was in the car, her registration. Mom had already left town by then, already gone back to her other life permanently. The funeral home never questioned it because why would they? We had death certificates, police reports, everything official. I sat there trying to process what I was hearing. My wife had essentially purchased a body double, paid a dying woman to die in her place. Staged her own death, attended her own funeral from afar maybe. Or maybe she didn't even care enough to watch. You let me bury a stranger, I said slowly. You watched me fall apart for 6 months. You sat with me while I cried. You held my hand at the funeral. You helped me clean out her closet. All of it was a lie. Emma broke down completely, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. I didn't know how to stop it once it started. I thought if enough time passed, you'd heal. That it would hurt less than the truth. That eventually you'd move on and maybe even find happiness again. I laughed then. A short, bitter sound with no humor in it whatsoever. You thought lying to me was kindness. You thought letting me mourn a woman who was alive was mercy. I closed my eyes, breathing slowly, carefully, trying to keep the rage from consuming me completely. Take me home, I said. Dad, we need to talk about this. We need to figure out what to do. Take me home, Emma, now. She started the car, her hands still shaking. Neither of us spoke during the drive back. Every minute of silence felt like another betrayal, another lie stacking on top of decades of lies. When we arrived at my house, I got out without looking at her. Dad, please, she called after me through the open car door. We can fix this. We can figure it out together. Fix what? I asked, turning back to her. You can't fix this, Emma. You can't undo years of deception. You can't give me back the life I thought I had. You can't make me unknow what I know now. But Dad, I love you. I know you do, I said quietly. But love without honesty is just another pretty lie. And I'm done with lies. I walked into my house and closed the door, leaving her sitting in the driveway. Inside, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around at the life I thought I'd lived. 41 years of marriage, decades of memories, all of it built on sand. But as I sat there in the growing darkness, one thing became crystal clear. I was done being the man who accepted lies as truth. I was done being the victim in someone else's story. Whatever came next, it wouldn't be forgiveness. It wouldn't be acceptance. It would be something else entirely. It would be reckoning. For 3 days, I did nothing. I didn't call Emma back. I didn't answer her. Messages that filled my phone with apologies and pleas and explanations. That meant nothing anymore. I watched her pull into my driveway twice from the upstairs window and leave again. When I didn't open the door, I let the phone ring until it stopped, then ring again, then go silent. 41 years of marriage had trained me to always respond, to always fix things, to always be the reasonable one who smoothed over conflicts and found compromises. This time I chose silence. Not the silence of fear or grief, the silence of calculation. I slept little, maybe 3 or 4 hours a night in brief stretches, but I was no longer pacing or crying or breaking down. Something inside me had shifted fundamentally. Grief had burned itself out completely, leaving behind something cold and steady and clear. Clarity. Pure, undiluted clarity. I replayed everything Emma had told me, not as a husband or a father, but as a witness analyzing evidence. Fake death, stolen identity, hidden assets that must exist somewhere, forged documents, a purchased body, insurance fraud because I'd received the life insurance payout, $50,000 that I'd barely touched because spending, it felt like erasing her. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a crime. Multiple crimes, felonies. On the 4th morning, I woke up before dawn and knew exactly what I was going to do. I took a long shower, letting the hot water ground me, center me, prepare me. I dressed carefully in clothes that made me feel like myself again. Not the broken widower everyone pitied, but the man I used to be before all of this. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone older, yes, but sharper, more focused, awake in a way I hadn't been in years, maybe decades. I drove downtown to a building I'd passed 100 times and never noticed. 3rd floor, frosted glass door, simple black letters on the sign, private investigations. The man behind the desk was in his late 50s, graying hair, sharp eyes that took in everything without seeming to move. He looked up when I entered and studied me without speaking, making his assessment. I need to find someone, I said, sitting down without waiting to be invited. He leaned back in his chair. Is she missing or hiding? Hiding, I replied. And legally dead, that got his attention. Both eyebrows went up slightly. I told him everything. Not the emotions, not the 41 years of memories, but the facts. The accident, the closed casket, the funeral, the sighting at the grocery store, the house, the other family, the confession from my daughter. I showed him the photos I'd taken. He listened without interrupting, taking notes occasionally, his expression never changing. When I finished, he nodded slowly. If what you're saying is true, and I believe it is, this goes beyond marital infidelity. This is identity fraud, insurance fraud, possibly conspiracy. The body in your wife's grave, that's its own problem. This will take time. It will cost money. And when we're done, there will be criminal charges. I can pay, I said. I want proof. Bank records, property records, the fake accident report, the real death certificate of the woman in that grave. Everything. I want documentation that can't be disputed. He named a number. I didn't flinch. I wrote the check right there, my hand steady. I want the truth documented, I said. Not suspected, proven beyond any doubt. He smiled faintly for the first time. I can do that, Mr. Williams. I can absolutely do that. Over the next week, I became a ghost in my own life. I returned to the quiet street with the yellow house at different hours, wearing different clothes, hats, and sunglasses, parking in different spots. I learned her schedule with the precision of someone conducting surveillance, because that's exactly what I was doing. She left every morning at 7:30 for her real estate office. She returned around 5:15. Weekends were for the grandchildren, elaborate outings to parks and museums. Sundays were for church, the whole family dressed up, looking picture perfect. A good woman, the neighbors would have said if you asked them. A devoted grandmother, a loving wife. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew about the other life she'd erased. The other husband she'd buried alive without killing him. I learned the name she used now. Jennifer Caldwell, the work she did, successful real estate agent with her own small firm. I learned about her daughter Rebecca, who had no idea her mother had another child, another family, another complete existence. I watched her touch Richard's arm the way she used to touch mine. I watched her smile with the ease of someone who believed her past was buried deep enough to never surface. It wasn't. The investigator called me 8 days later. I've got enough for a comprehensive report, he said. You need to come in. The folder he handed me was thick, heavy with the weight of truth. Fake birth certificate for Jennifer Caldwell issued 23 years ago, around the time her double life began. Bank accounts opened under the false name. Property records showing she'd owned the yellow house for 18 years. Tax returns filed separately. Insurance policies. A marriage license to Richard Caldwell from 18 years ago, while she was still legally married to me, and then the deeper findings. Financial transfers. Over the years, she'd been siphoning money from our joint accounts. Small amounts that wouldn't be noticed. Building a nest egg in her other life. Close to $300,000 transferred over 2 decades. Money that was half mine. Money she'd stolen. And the final page destroyed whatever small piece of my heart still functioned. Phone records from 6 months ago. Multiple calls between Sarah and Emma before the accident. After the funeral. During the months I thought I was grieving alone. Emma hadn't just known. She'd stayed involved. She'd helped coordinate. She'd been an active participant in my deception. I closed the folder slowly, carefully. Thank you, I said, my voice steady. This is exactly what I needed. What are you going to do with it? He asked. The right thing, I replied. I'm going to tell the truth. As I walked out of that office with the folder under my arm, something settled inside me. This was no longer about rage or revenge or even justice in the traditional sense. It was about refusing to be erased from my own life. It was about standing up and saying no. I existed, our marriage existed, and you don't get to pretend it didn't. They thought I would mourn forever. They thought my silence meant weakness. They thought grief had broken me too completely to fight back. They were wrong. The storm hadn't passed. It was only just beginning. And I was bringing thunder. I didn't confront Emma right away. That was the hardest part, harder than anything else in this nightmare. Every instinct in me wanted to drive to her house, throw the folder on her table, and demand answers, demand accountability, demand she look me in the eye and explain how she could do this to her own father. But anger rushes. Strategy waits, and for the first time in my life, I chose patience over emotion. I took the folder home and read every page slowly, methodically, like I was studying for the most important test of my life. Bank transfers with dates and amounts. Accounts opened under false identities. Documents signed while Sarah was supposedly dead. Except she wasn't dead, she was living another life entirely. Everything was neat, organized, planned years in advance. This had never been a desperate decision made in panic. It had been calculated, methodical, executed with precision. I made an appointment with an attorney the next morning. Not the kind who handled wills or divorces or simple legal matters. I needed someone who understood fraud, financial crimes, identity theft. Someone who wouldn't be shocked by what I had to tell them. Her name was Patricia Morrison, late 40s, reputation for being ruthless, no wasted words. She listened to my story without interrupting. Reviewed the documents with the focused intensity of a surgeon. Examining x-rays. What you're describing is a criminal conspiracy, she said finally, looking up at me. Your wife committed identity fraud, insurance fraud, and financial theft. Your daughter aided and abetted. You're entitled to restitution. And there's strong ground for criminal charges that could result in significant prison time. I felt a strange calm listening to her lay out the reality. What do you need from me? I asked. A confession would help, she replied. Especially from your daughter. We also need proof of direct financial transfers and forged authorizations. If we have those, the case becomes airtight. I already knew where those documents would be. Emma kept files at her home office. She'd always been meticulous about record keeping, a trait she'd inherited from her mother, ironically enough. But first, I needed her to talk. I called her that afternoon, letting the phone ring until she answered, breathless and desperate. Dad, she said immediately. Thank God, I've been so worried. Are you okay? I'm tired, I said, letting my voice soften, letting her hear what she wanted to hear. I don't want to fight anymore. I just need to understand everything clearly so I can figure out how to move forward. The relief in her breath was audible. Of course, Dad. Anything you want to know? I'll tell you everything. Let's have lunch tomorrow, I said. Somewhere quiet where we can really talk. She agreed without hesitation, eager to repair what she thought was repairable. That night I placed a small digital recorder in my jacket pocket. I practiced keeping my hands still, my voice neutral. I rehearsed my questions until they sounded like curiosity instead of interrogation, like a father trying to understand instead of a prosecutor building a case. At lunch the next day I listened. I let her talk. I asked gentle questions about when the plan started, how the money was moved, who signed what documents, where the insurance payout went. Each answer came easily to her now, unguarded, confident that I was still just her father, still safe, still someone she could manipulate with the right words and enough tears. She didn't notice the recorder. She didn't notice that every word was sealing her fate and her mother's. While we ate, my attorney and the investigator were already at work. With the evidence I'd provided, they'd secured legal grounds to subpoena financial records. The transactions told a damning story. Forged signatures on property transfers, unauthorized withdrawals from accounts, funds wired into accounts I didn't know existed. By the time lunch ended, the trap was completely closed. That afternoon, my attorney filed a formal complaint with the district attorney, fraud, forgery, financial exploitation, identity theft, insurance fraud. The list went on. 2 hours later, she called me. The DA's office has accepted the case. They're taking it very seriously. Warrants are being prepared. When? I asked. Soon, within days. I sat alone in my living room when the call ended. The house was absolutely quiet. No music, no television, just the steady tick of the clock on the wall marking time, marking the end of one life and the beginning of something else entirely. I thought of the man I'd been 6 months ago, crying into an empty pillow, begging God to bring his wife back, willing to give anything for just one more day with her. That man wouldn't have survived this moment, but I was no longer him. I didn't feel joy or triumph. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt resolved, certain. The truth was no longer mine alone to carry. Soon it would belong to the law, to the courts, to public record. Soon everyone would know what had been done to me. The first call came 3 days later at dawn. It wasn't Emma, it was my attorney. They've executed the warrants, she said. Your daughter was taken into custody at 6 this morning. No resistance. Your wife is being picked up as we speak. I closed my eyes and let the words settle into my bones. Somewhere across the city, Emma was being handcuffed, read her rights, led into a police car while neighbors watched through their windows. Somewhere else, Sarah was experiencing the same thing, her perfect second life exploding around her. The weight of that didn't feel like victory. It felt like inevitability. It felt like gravity finally working the way it was supposed to. An hour later, my phone began to ring. Emma's number, over and over. I didn't answer. Then a message from her husband, short and confused and angry. What the hell did you do, William? I set the phone face down and made coffee, going through the morning routine with mechanical precision. By noon, the news had spread through the family like wildfire. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Old friends who'd stood beside me at the funeral, who'd hugged me and told me Sarah was in a better place. Now they were calling to ask questions they didn't really want answered. Questions that would force them to reconsider everything they thought they knew. I ignored them all. At 2 in the afternoon, my attorney called again. There's been a development, she said. Your wife is trying to make a deal. She wants to confess in exchange for reduced charges. She's claiming your daughter was the mastermind. Of course she is, I said. She's always been good at rewriting history. The attorney paused. Do you want to be notified if she makes a statement? No, I said. I already know everything I need to know. That evening, I received a message from Emma's lawyer asking if I'd be willing to meet with her to discuss the situation, to find some kind of resolution that didn't involve destroying the whole family. I deleted it without responding. The time for family meetings had passed. We were beyond that now. 2 weeks later, I attended the preliminary hearing. I sat in the back of the courtroom and watched as Sarah was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hands cuffed in front of her. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, all the confidence and grace stripped away. When her eyes found mine across the courtroom, I saw something I'd never seen before. Fear. Real, genuine fear. I held her gaze and didn't look away. I wanted her to see that I was still here, still standing, still breathing despite everything she'd done to erase me. Emma's hearing was the next day. She cried through most of it, her lawyer painting her as a victim of her mother's manipulation, a daughter torn between two parents who made a tragic mistake. I listened to the arguments without emotion. The prosecutor laid out the evidence methodically. The forged documents, the financial transfers, the insurance fraud. The purchased body now exhumed and identified as Patricia Morrison, just as the investigator had found. The conspiracy to fake a death. When it was over, the judge set bail at amounts they couldn't easily pay. Most of their assets had been frozen pending the investigation. They would stay in custody. As I left the courthouse, reporters called out questions. I didn't answer. I just walked to my car and drove away. That night, for the first time in months, I slept through the entire night. Not because I felt peace, but because I felt complete. The truth was out. The lies were exposed. Whatever happened next would happen in the light. 3 weeks later, Sarah's attorney contacted me directly with an offer. She would plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a recommended sentence of 8 to 10 years. She would make a full confession. She would cooperate completely. She was asking if I would be willing to provide a statement to the court, asking for leniency. I read the message 3 times, then wrote a simple reply. No, she made her choices. Now she lives with the consequences. Emma's trial came first. Her attorney tried to paint her as a victim, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. I attended the sentencing. She looked at me from across the courtroom, tears streaming down her face, mouthing the words "I'm sorry" over and over. I nodded once, slowly. Sorry didn't change anything. Sorry didn't give me back the years. Sorry didn't undo the betrayal. But it was something. Sarah's plea deal was accepted. 8 years in federal prison for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The day of her sentencing, I drove to the courthouse but didn't go inside. I sat in the parking lot and tried to feel something. Anything. Satisfaction, relief, closure. Instead, I just felt tired. That evening, I went to the cemetery where Patricia Morrison had been buried under my wife's name. Her real family had reclaimed her body and given her a proper burial elsewhere. The plot was empty now, the headstone with Sarah's name removed. I stood there for a few minutes, not mourning but acknowledging. This was where my old life had ended. This empty grave marked the death of the man who believed in the fairy tale, who trusted blindly, who loved without question. That man was gone. In his place stood someone different, someone harder, someone who understood that love without truth was just an elaborate lie. I left without looking back. Today, my life is quieter, smaller in some ways. I sold the house, the one Sarah and I shared, the one filled with memories that turned out to be half fiction. I moved to a smaller place across town. I started teaching woodworking classes at the community college, something I'd always wanted to do. I joined a hiking group. I made new friends who knew me as William, not as the widower, not as the victim, just as myself. I don't date. Maybe someday, but not yet. For now, I'm learning how to be comfortable with my own company, how to trust my own judgment again. Emma writes me letters from prison. Long letters full of apologies and explanations and pleas for forgiveness. I read them all, but I don't respond. Not yet, maybe never. Some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt. Sarah tried to write once. I sent the letter back unopened. She took enough from me. She doesn't get my forgiveness, too. 6 months after the sentencing, I received a call from Rebecca, Sarah's other daughter, my stepdaughter who never knew I existed. She wanted to meet. She had questions. We met at a coffee shop. She was 15, bright, confused, angry at her mother for the lies, but also grieving the loss of the grandmother she'd known. We talked for 2 hours. I showed her pictures of Emma at that age. The resemblance was striking, undeniable. Sisters who never knew about each other. At the end, she asked the question I'd been waiting for. Do you hate my mom? I thought about it for a long moment, really considered it. No, I said finally. I hate what she did. I hate the lies and the deception and the years she stole. But hate is exhausting. It takes energy I don't want to spend anymore. She nodded, wise beyond her years. Can I call you sometimes? She asked. I'd like to know about that part of Mom's life. The part she hid. Yes, I said. You can call. And she did. Every few weeks we'd talk. I'd tell her stories about the Sarah I knew. The woman before the lies, before the double life. She'd tell me about the Jennifer she knew. Slowly, we pieced together a complete picture of a woman who was neither angel nor demon, just someone who made terrible choices and hurt everyone who loved her. That's the lesson I carried forward. People are complicated. Love is messy. Trust is precious and fragile. And the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than the most beautiful lie. Learned that loyalty without honesty is just another form of betrayal. I learned that staying silent to keep the peace is the same as being complicit in the deception. I learned that grief can be real even when the loss is a lie. And that sometimes the hardest part of healing is accepting that the person you loved never really existed the way you thought they did. Most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to choose yourself. Never too late to demand the truth. Never too late to say no to being erased from your own story. That choice, that moment of standing up and refusing to accept the lies anymore, that's what saved me. Not the legal victory, not the justice system, not the prison sentences or the money recovered or the vindication. It was the simple act of saying out loud, this happened to me, and I will not pretend it didn't. Today, I'm 67 years old. I have gray hair and wrinkles and a knee that aches when it rains. I live alone in a modest apartment. I teach woodworking to teenagers who mostly just want an easy elective credit. I hike on weekends. I read more than I used to. I sleep well most nights. My life is simple, quiet, and it's completely honestly mine. No secrets, no lies, no elaborate deceptions masquerading as love. Just truth. And truth, I've learned, is the only foundation strong enough to build a real life on. Everything else, no matter how beautiful, eventually crumbles. That's what I would tell anyone going through something similar. Don't accept the lies, even comfortable ones. Don't stay silent to keep the peace. Don't sacrifice your truth to protect someone else's fiction. The storm that comes when you speak up will be terrible. It will hurt. It will destroy things you thought were permanent. But on the other side of that storm is something worth having. Yourself, whole, honest, free. And that, I've learned, is worth any price.